Hello, everybody. Welcome to this podcast. Basically, just to set the scene, Dr. Fola-Alade, I originally trained as a medical doctor, and I pastor the Liberty Church. And I feel an awesome responsibility on my shoulder, both as a trained medical doctor and a shepherd to many people in our congregation, but more so as a representative of many within the society. And we're speaking today on the COVID vaccine virus and its uptake within our communities, particularly the Black community or African and Caribbean community in the United Kingdom, and also the African American community within the US. It is said apparently, I mean, I was corrected yesterday, I thought it was that 40% of the people within the Black community in the United Kingdom said they will not take the COVID vaccine. But I was corrected that it's apparently 67 to 70% of the people who said they will not take the COVID vaccine for whatever reasons. And interestingly, so a number of pastors apparently, for their reasons best known to them, are against the virus, somewhat understandably. And then there's another crew, another set who are very for the virus and pro the virus. And even amongst my doctor friends, a certain percentage are still reticent and hesitant about the safety and the efficacy of the virus. So you have, a myriad of views out there. And so if doctors and religious leaders themselves are not fully certain and convinced, how much more the general populace. And so this program seeks to, in a sense, bring some kind of clarity and information. The Bible says that my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. And I believe very strongly that knowledge is needed to come to conviction and to come to a place where we can make informed decisions. And so with that in mind, I have brought in my medical colleagues. We'll start with two of my very good friends of over 30-something years. One of them, I believe, 36 years, and the other is actually a family friend, and perhaps maybe longer. And both of them are very prolific in their field. We have the person of Dr. Tayo Adesonoye, who is an emergency doctor, is a family medicine and emergency medicine practitioner, and he lives in Dallas, Texas, and he owns his own practice. So for those of you who are in England, an emergency doctor is an A&E, accident and emergency doctor. And so he's going to be talking about his experiences from the field and how he came to his own decisions concerning whether he would take or has taken the vaccine. And then we also have my very good friend and colleague who I've known for many years, where we were actually both classmates in medical school. But he is a professor of infectious medicine with a specialty in particular in the area of HIV. And he lives in Chicago. He has many accolades to his name, but for sake of time, we will just keep it at the fact that he's a professor in this area of interest. Okay, so I'll just welcome both of them very quickly. And so can we have you say your hello, Dr. Adesonoye?
Yes, hi. This is Dr. Tayo Adesonoye, Dallas, Texas. It's actually a pleasure being involved in this conversation, which is really, really key. And it's actually amazing that, there's distrust in, both, the Afro-Caribbean community in the UK and African Americans over here in the US, So um, thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this,
My,
and hopefully we'll get some message through.
my pleasure. And so can we have Professor Babafemi Taiwo please just say a few words of introduction?
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to be on this platform with Dr. Pastor Fola-Alade and Dr. Adesonye. I hope that over the next hour, we'll have some interesting discussions that can help shed some light on this very important topic that really affects Black people across the globe.
Thank you very much, Prof. Okay, so I'll start with Dr. Adesonye. As an emergency room doctor, tell me about your experience concerning the COVID vaccine and how, in a sense, you came to your decision as to whether you would take the vaccine or not, what your initial concerns were, and how you came to your convictions, and how you would advise people generally. Yes, if we can do it in about 5 to 7 minutes. Right.
Okay. So I work only in the emergency room, and Texas was a real hotbed for COVID-19, both when the illness got over to the US during the surge, and even until now as we speak. So on a daily basis, I see, during the surge, 50 to 60 patients. That's me seeing 50 to 60 patients a day or per shift. And out of those 50 patients, about 30, 40 of them would come in solely with either flu-like symptoms or they want to get tested for COVID. And at least in the hospital that I worked at, I was getting about a 30, 35% positive rate, which is ridiculously high. March 18th, I actually got COVID myself. And that was after, treating a patient. At that time, we didn't know much about COVID. And, I just had just a tiny sore throat. Went home, and thank God, this is not going all spiritual, but thank God the Holy Spirit just told me to self-isolate, which is really, really out of the blues, because having a slight sore throat, really shouldn't be so concerning. But I got home that day and I just said to my wife, I said, hey, you know what, I'm just going to isolate. And that was on a Sunday. And then Monday, I drove over to the testing site that was just opened in Dallas, and voila, my test came back positive about 4 or 5 days later. So of course, as I said, just seeing a plethora of cases on a daily basis, and then when the idea of the vaccine came forward, it just shows the ignorance, not only with the population at large, but even within healthcare professionals as well. I was pretty hesitant, one, because of the new technology, being an mRNA, vaccine. I said, look, you know what, I'd rather wait for a traditional vaccine per se, like what you have in England, the Oxford vaccine or the AstraZeneca. But when we had the late surge, October, November last year, the cases shot up to about 70, 80 patients that we're seeing a day, in the ER. And the positivity rate remained at about 35 or so, 35, 40%. I think what actually broke the camel's back, for me was when I started my shift, it was about a week, about a month ago, I went for my shift. The first 10 patients I saw came in for COVID. 9 out of 10 were positive. And I thought, look, you know what, look, this has gone way beyond, just trying to wait for a vaccine that I think I'll be comfortable with, which is the DNA vaccine, AKA the Oxford vaccine that you have in the UK. I mean, that's not going to be out in the US for a few more months. So at that time, I said, look, you know what? This issue of the uncertainties of the mRNA vaccine, the uncertainties in terms of the long-term side effects profile that we don't know, the uncertainty in terms of, oh, is this going to affect my genome, which of course, it's not going to. I just said, look, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and get the vaccine. But the next day, I got off my shift and I said, hey, you know what? I'll get a jab. So that's it in a nutshell.
Okay, well, let's take it one issue at a time. So, what your major concern was the issue that the vaccine that is out in the US is, you were saying something about mRNA. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, okay.
And why you have fears with that regard?
Okay, so we had two vaccines for or two classes, should I say, for COVID-19. One is mRNA based, and then the other one is the traditional DNA type vaccines. And the mRNA vaccine is actually a new vaccine, and this is the first time that we're actually using it, on humans. So and it's a new technology, actually very, very smart technology, I mean, if you were to ask me. But at that time, I guess it was more ignorance on my part, and I'm a healthcare professional, and ignorance on my part in terms of going to learn more about this vaccine. I mean, the questions of course will still be there, in terms of how safe is the vaccine, what are the long-term side effects. This vaccine was rushed into production. Well, the reason why it was rushed into production was that certain phases of the development process, were pretty much compacted. So many of us had those concerns. I can tell you, not even only amongst, the Black race, many of my nurses, many of my Caucasian colleagues, especially in the ER, are still very, very hesitant, taking the jab, taking the vaccine. So, as I said, so you have the mRNA type vaccine, you have the DNA type vaccine. mRNA type vaccines are, vaccines by Pfizer and vaccines by Moderna. And the DNA vaccines are, AstraZeneca, which is the
So what's the fear concerning the mRNA? What in layman's terms as possible, why will a doctor be anxious,
Okay.
concerning the mRNA?
It's the fear of the unknown.
Okay.
No, especially since it's a new technology and it's a new virus. It's the fear of the unknown. It's the fear of, are they going to have long-term side effects? But I mean, but the thing though is that, I mean, the FDA went ahead and gave a thumbs up for these vaccines, because per the studies that were done, you would expect, within a 2-month, time frame, and I'll let Dr. Prof, probably highlight this, within a 2-month time frame, that you should have seen side effects from the virus. So they saw only minimal, and then that's why the FDA gave the thumbs up, or the EUA approval for those vaccines. So the fear of the unknown, like what's going to happen 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years later. The safety as well, the safety profile, was key as well. And many of us just lacked, the knowledge, about these vaccines, to be honest with you. But now there's a lot of literature out there that you could actually go and read, and you actually, get yourself better informed, which earlier on, many of us, were not well informed.
I mean, there has been general talk out there about the fact that the possibility that the mRNA vaccine can change one's gene makeup. Yeah. Is that, is there any weight of truth in that?
Well, you know what? Unfortunately, not. No, it cannot. or rather, fortunately, it cannot, because the way in which the mRNA vaccine actually works is that I said it is smart technology. They get the virus, encased in a nanolipid particle, and when that attaches onto this, I'm trying to be non-technical as possible. When that attaches onto the cell, then this piece, which is the mRNA piece, is actually injected into our cell, and it stays in the cytoplasm. So the cytoplasm is like the fluid menu, so to speak, of the cell, not the nucleus.
Okay,
So
it doesn't get into...
Right. So if you look at nucleus, that we, that you have DNA and all that stuff, things that can, control your genome. No, it works within the cytoplasm. Ribosome,
not where the genes are.
Not where the genes are, exactly,
Okay.
So then it gets attached onto ribosomes, which now make copies, and then those are now, sent out of the cells, and then the body now generates an immune response to that.
Okay.
The funny thing, though, to be honest with you, is actually that the DNA viruses, or rather the DNA vaccine, works in a different pathway. After it attaches, it actually goes into the nucleus, but does not affect the DNA production, because it elicits the formation of an mRNA, which actually comes out of the nucleus into the cytoplasm, and then goes on to ribosome, similar to mRNA in that, at that portion, and then it gets, sent out of the cell.
But the thing is that the DNA model of vaccine has been proven over years, so we are conversant with it. We are comfortable with what we know, more or less.
Exactly.
Okay, let me move this on quickly. So have you taken the vaccine now?
Yes, I have. I took the vaccine first week in February.
And it was the mRNA one,
which is what is
available. And it's on the basis that, look, you are posed with risks daily, and rather than the possible long-term risk of the mRNA type vaccine, there's an immediate risk here of COVID infection, which is more fatal and immediate.
Yes.
And exactly. I believe your wife didn't have any hesitation at all. She took the other vaccine before you.
You know what I mean? I'm going to crack a joke here. This is serious business that we're talking about. But all my colleagues, all my Nigerian colleagues that I live around, they're all doctors here, and they had their vaccinations, early in January. My wife is an ophthalmologist who rarely comes out, in contact with COVID cases, got her vaccine mid-January. But I kept telling all my friends, hey, you know what? I'm going to wait for the traditional AstraZeneca vaccine or the Johnson & Johnson. But you know what? I guess the fatigue and the daily batter of just seeing COVID patients, having patients walking in ridiculously sick with COVID. And I just thought, that day was just, honestly, first 10 patients I saw, they were all COVID patients. 9 out of 10 came back positive.
Wow.
And I thought, look, you know what? And they were sick. And I thought, look, forget this. I'm just going to go ahead. And I got the Moderna vaccine. I'm not promoting Moderna versus Pfizer. I got the vaccine that was available to me, that I could get within 24 to 48 hours. And it was the Moderna vaccine, so I just went ahead and, and then.
Okay, and you've not had any immediate side effects?
Well,
and since then, how have you fared?
Okay, well,
before we go on to Prof.
Within 24 hours, I had severe flu-like illness, and actually missed work, the next day. So what do I mean, flu-like illness? Body aches, some fever, well, it was mostly body aches, fever, headaches. And I had that within 24 hours. And of course, at the injection site was very, very painful. But the ID doctor that I spoke with told me that, hey, you know what? your immune system is robust. And that's not because I had COVID before. So that's why I had that kind of response, within 24 hours after getting the Moderna vaccine.
So I mean, well, we all know as doctors that that is a normal response to any kind of vaccine, be it measles, yellow fever, smallpox. Yeah. So it's not strange. Right. Okay, we're cognizant of time. Thanks for your contribution. We'll come back to you, Dr. Tayo. Prof, let's hear your voice and your thoughts on the whole issue of the vaccine. So give us in about 5 or so minutes, and then I'll ask you some questions.
Yeah, thanks very much, Dr. Sola Fola-Alade. I think my colleague described very well how the different vaccines work. With respect to the question about safety, one additional point I'd like to make is that mRNA is a form of protein that our body makes all the time. And the way it works is that it performs its function and then is very rapidly degraded by the system, by the body. In fact, the only reason the mRNA vaccines work is because of that protective layer of fat or lipids in which it's been encased. Otherwise, it will not be able to be injected into humans in the first place. So with respect to the question of whether it will cause long-term side effects, it does not stay long-term in the human body. Once it gets into the cytoplasm, makes the protein that it's supposed to make, that mRNA is degraded and it goes away completely. So that should provide a lot of reassurance to people who are thinking about the safety of vaccines in general. And I think that just like any technology or any device, if you were a business person, you would agree that if a new technology or product was introduced into the market, there will be early adopters, right? Adopters who will immediately embrace it and start using it, and a few people, perhaps the majority, will step back. So what we're seeing in the context of the vaccine is not really strange. We would always have doubts, we will always have early adopters and late adopters. The issue, though, is that here the consequence of being a late adopter could be significant, not just for the individual who is delaying the acceptance of vaccination, but for society as a group. Because we are in a race against time, and we know that viruses live to mutate. And the more the opportunity exists for it to move from Mr. A to Mrs. B and Miss K, the more it is going to mutate. We've heard about variants that are emerging, and they come in different flavors. You know about the UK variant, which some people like to call the Kent variant. You have the South African variant, the New York variant, and so on, the Brazilian variant. All of these variants occur because that's what viruses do. The power that we have to interrupt this natural process is to get people immune. And to be immune, you can do that by being exposed to the natural infection, which of course is a risky activity because you may be exposed and it may kill you. On the other hand, we have this process of achieving immunity that is relatively risk-free. And if you look at one of the things that people often bring up is that the development was rushed. In fact, it's true that the development was compressed. And the first time that we knew about the sequence of the virus was on January 10, 2020, when the Chinese government released the sequence and said, okay, this is the Wuhan strain of SARS-CoV-2, and this is what it looks like. Within 11 months, a paper was published on December 10. The mRNA vaccine was published, and we really, in 11 months, did something that normally would take 4, 6, 8 years. Although it was faster, accelerated, all the different stages that you normally go through in vaccine development took place. There were animal studies. There was phase 1 studies looking at just pure safety. There were phase 2 studies looking at safety, PK, and large phase 3 studies in which over 40,000 individuals participated, about half receiving the active vaccine, about half receiving placebo. So very significant scientific rigor went into the development of these vaccines. And we know sufficiently about it to be able to recommend it for patients, and really as a matter of urgency. And I like the way you described it, Dr. Fola-Alade, when you said, and I think Dr. Adeson made the same allusion, that the vaccine that you should get is the one that is available to you, because we really need to get very quickly to that position of herd immunity in which we, as a community, are protected against the virus.
Thank you for so much, Professor Babafemi. Now, let me ask some specific questions. You addressed the issue of safety to a large degree. I want to talk a bit more about efficacy, especially that you spoke about the various variants, the South African variant, the UK variant, Brazilian, and New York. The vaccine is clearly, vicious, virulent, and it's mutating. And so is it as it were that we could have a case where vaccines are coming out, it's changing so fast, and then the vaccines become almost obsolete? Or will you say that the vaccines we have right now are able to cover, the various variants that are coming out of the arsenal?
I think the latter is closer to the truth. And we know that some of the variants are a little bit stubborn. And again, it's a battle because the virus wants to survive. So it's in a constant attempt to evade whatever stuff we're throwing at it. But as of today, the vaccines that we have work against the different variants to a large extent. We do know that some of the variants, for example, the South African variant, may not be as susceptible to some of the vaccines as the other variants. But even in that context, you have to look at it as a matter of how much protection are we getting or not. And I think this point should drive it home, that even in the context of concerns about efficacy, etc., the persons who received the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, for example, in the clinical trials, nobody was admitted and nobody died. So when you look at efficacy, you have to look at it in terms of prevention of infection, prevention of admission, prevention of death. We know without any doubt that the vaccines that are out there now are effective in preventing bad outcomes, which is a very critical thing. And I think everything will be added onto it if you can get that crossed. But again, time is not on our side because the potential exists for that nightmarish scenario that you described. We're not there yet. And hopefully we will never get there, in which we would have vaccines that are out there and variants that are completely defiant to the vaccine.
Okay, I mean, yesterday I was speaking with Dr. Tayo, and he muted that about the possibility of one vaccine maybe having about 65% coverage and another one 95%. Can you shed some light on that? Or will you say from your own experience that they have the same potential?
No, I can explain that. And the first point is the ones that were reported to be 95% and 94% effective were the mRNA vaccine, so the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine. And the one that you talked about has been 66% effective is actually the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And the first point is that the studies were not done exactly the same way. So when you say 95% in one and 66% in other, you're not really looking at exactly the same. It's called endpoint in research, which is what do you call success? So the definition of success in those studies were not exactly the same. And so it's not totally fair to say, oh, this is 95, this is 60. No, this is 62, 66%. That's the first point. The second point is that in that study in which 66% had efficacy, it actually varied by region. So in the United States, for example, it was 72%. In South Africa, it was 59%, right? And so you have an average of 66% globally. But the main point that refers again to what I said earlier, that even when the efficacy was reported to be 66%, not a single person ended up being admitted among those in the Johnson study. And secondly, not a single person died. Whereas amongst the people who got placebo, which is like salt water, basically active vaccine, there were deaths. There were admissions to the hospital. So without a doubt, that vaccine, even though it's claimed to be 66%, largely because of this South African variant, it's really still did its work. The other point that is why it's not fair to compare them head to head, like 95 and 66, is that the Moderna vaccine, for example, was studied only in the United States. It was not studied against the South African variant. Whereas the Johnson & Johnson vaccine was studied more globally, including South Africa, where we had some of these small stubborn variants. So it's not fair to really put them head to head. So overall, the vaccines work, and you should get the one that's available to you.
Okay. In lieu of our time, I want to quickly address some other issues, and they are kind of more interesting, fringe ideas and thoughts. So I was listening to some individual the other day talk about something about an RFID chip, which is, or could be put into vaccines for monitoring patients and all of that stuff. And I was trying to tie it into some fears that especially certain people within the church, the religious field, have concerning a chip being introduced when vaccines are given to monitor people, and that is the beginning of the New World Order, possibly the mark of the beast and all of that. And this is a very real fear. People are talking about it. Churches, some pastors are standing and saying that members should not take this because it is the mark of the beast. First of all, how true is this, and is this technology possible? Yes, Prof.
Well, thanks for the question. I think we should always acknowledge the fact that when people express things like this, they are coming from a place of that's important. We have to acknowledge that. And there's totally a history certainly in Africa of research being abusive and patients being treated in the wrong way. And of course, we know that all kinds of things are possible. Now, fear is an emotion that we have to handle very carefully. If we handle it the wrong way, it can actually be detrimental. Fear, as you said at the introduction of the program, should cause us to seek information and really have an informed response. So specific to your question, I do not know of any credible way in which what you described is going to take place. Because the whole development of the vaccine is not done by just one individual. It's really done by many, many, many people. And the rigorous processes that go into looking at the ethics of everything that is going on. And whereas this is a fear that is being expressed, there's really no credibility to that fear, that somehow some chip will be implanted and thus it will begin to cause a new world order. But I think in really addressing this, we shouldn't just dismiss it. We should try to listen to the source of the concern and really provide reassurance that, yes, we understand your concern. Yes, we know things have been done that are negative in the past, but specific to this issue, there are really a lot of people looking at it, and there is no credibility to that fear. Let's be afraid, but let it not make us not to take the vaccine.
But from a doctor's viewpoint, is that technology even possible? That a nanochip can be implanted into the blood via vaccine that will monitor? They talk about the Internet of Things and all of that. Is that a possibility at all? Let's leave out the ethics.
Right. I think that research has gotten to a place that impossible is a word that I hesitate to use. I think that with enough manipulation, etc., possibilities of the human mind and innovation is quite limitless, right? So I wouldn't say that, oh no, it's impossible to do that, but I don't believe that that's something that is credibly going on in any fashion at this time.
Okay, let me bring up another.
You know what? Just let me chip in a little bit there, and
Yes.
I mean I totally agree with all what you know Prof has voiced, but this just shows you the the mistrust that you know we have in the healthcare system, based on past atrocities in quote that has been done. You know, using the Tuskegee guys for example, they've just that, especially amongst the African American community here, they've that mistrust that they don't trust whatever these guys are telling them. And then, yes, I mean, I've heard about what you said about, you know, that, you know, if you get the mRNA vaccine, you know, you're getting some chip, you know, injected into you, that this is the beginning of the new world order. And then they said, oh, Bill Gates has stuff to do with this. Well, you know, I mean, look, it just shows you how, you know, the mind works and how people can, how far they can push things all the way to the extreme. Of course, ethically, you know, it's wrong. I mean, I honestly don't think, you know, something like that will be done. It's just ethically and morally wrong. However, you cannot underestimate the fears that, you know, folks over here, they've had based on past experiences,
Yes.
you know, in the system. So,
I mean, I was actually coming to you on that, and then we'll come back to Prof on his thoughts on the same, on the issue of mistrust, particularly on the issue. I know that there's a lot of talk about past incidents, especially with the Tuskegee experience.
Yeah.
You know, experimentation there, and you know how it affected the Black community. So if I would like you to just explain it in a minute or two, but if that kind of thing was really done there by humans, as it were, to humans, isn't it still possible today? So
well,
I mean, explain. I mean, let's not assume people understand the Tuskegee experiments. So if you just in a minute or so, you can just summarize that for us.
Yes, I mean, it happened in the early 90s, you know, maybe 1930s, where they had, you know, Black individuals, you know, were injected with the syphilis virus pretty much, and then they watched them over time to see, you know, pretty much see what the end outcomes will be without treating them, without giving them any forms of treatment. I think one of the people involved in that study probably just died not too long ago in his 90s. And so, you know, it leaked out to the general population that, oh, wow, a cohort of Blacks, I mean, because they were all Black people, you know, got the syphilis vaccine, and then they were, rather the virus, and then they were followed up in time to actually see what the end outcomes would be without giving them any form of treatment, you know. So and that was just morally wrong, you know. So and whenever anything has to do with, you know, African Americans or Blacks in this country and healthcare, when they confess their reluctance and all that stuff to use services provided to them, many people try and say, well, you know, there's this the Tuskegee effect, where Blacks, you know, they mistrust. I mean, if they could do something that evil, then why should we trust these guys? But I think we should really move. I mean, it's not. I'm not saying that because I'm from African descent, you know, but I think we really need to move beyond this. I mean, everything can be the Tuskegee effect. You know, there's racism and all that. I mean, we can open up a can of worms, you know, where you see they'll say Black patients are not treated the same way as their Caucasian, you know, equivalents. So there's racism. I mean, we know that, but I think we really need to move on. Easy for me to say as an African, yeah. But
yeah, I mean, I would ask Prof to make his contribution to that.
So in terms of whether the Tuskegee experiment,
yes,
and the mistrust that exists in the Black community, I think it's real, but it's not specific to COVID-19, right? It pervades all the. If you look at any health intervention or a health condition, we see the same effect. And if you think about how COVID has been more has disproportionately affected Blacks in the United States, for example, and I'm not sure what the experience is in the UK, but
it is the same in the UK. The fatalities are worse within the African and Caribbean community.
Right, I think
Asian.
We really have it's in our best interest to think, especially at this time. And if you think about technology being a potential tool to cause harm on a mass scale to Blacks, for example, there are many ways that could be done. It wouldn't have to be through COVID vaccine. After all, it's not the first vaccine that we're getting, right? People have to get different vaccinations, but even our foods, a lot of the foods that we eat now, they are grown in all kinds of different ways. When you go to the store to buy a mineral, a bottle of a Coke, you don't know every single component that's in that Coke bottle.
And genetically modified foods and all of that, yeah.
Everybody's going around taking all kinds of vitamins that have been processed and reprocessed in all kinds of laboratories, and they're doing so with confidence. You have no idea all the different components that are in the supplements that we all take so faithfully. So there's a certain amount of community trust that is imperative for all of us to get out of this together as a whole.
Yes, thanks for the contribution. As per the Tuskegee experiment and the shadow it has cast over, people's trust and take up of new medical interventions, I will generally say, as it concerns the COVID vaccine, I don't see how the Black community can be specifically targeted for evil in this instance, because everybody is being given the vaccine, Black, white, yellow, red. And so I don't see how, in particular, a vaccine will be produced that would identify Black people different to destroy them.
Right.
Sorry?
That's so important, because when you those vaccines, they come in vials, and each vial has multiple doses. And when you take the first dose, you give it to Mr. A, it's probably Black. The next person in line from the same vial could be white, and the next person could be Hispanic, and then is a Black person. So there is a community exposure here that really should give all of us confidence that
I mean, very well put. And I would say with that regards, even though I share the sentiments of people, it's sad, it's morally wrong what happened then, but we shouldn't let what happened then affect our safety now. And say, because certain things went wrong then. So it's almost like sulking and saying that, any new thing that has come from these tables, we will not take because of what happened back then. So the distrust we can understand, and we pray that those sentiments are healed over time. But I guess we should look at things more objectively as we make our decision. Okay,
well, Pastor, you see, or rather, Dr. Pastor.
Yes, no, I'm both.
Yeah, you see, but then that's why you're doing this.
Yes.
So you are doing this now. You're having this forum to try and enlighten, folks on, the importance of the vaccine, the importance of transparency, in the whole process. I mean, we could go into so many reasons why, the African American community and Hispanics over here in the US, why, they have a higher mortality and morbidity, from COVID. I mean, we could open up a can of worms and discuss that. There are actually many factors that contribute to that, But I think by us trying to educate our people, healthcare professionals, community leaders, churches, you know, they just let them know, that, look, this thing is safe. And I mean, I'm just going to steal what Prof said, in terms of a vial of vaccine is used for X, Y, Z. It could be white, brown, black. Nobody knows who's going to get the next shot. So how could you say that, you're targeting just one population? I mean, unless you're targeting the whole population, so, but by everybody being on the same page and educating the populace at large, I think we'll achieve what we're all trying to do.
Thank you very much for those thoughts. Two quick things. The first one, and I don't want to belabor the point so that we can talk about a more important thing before we round up, is again the issue of ethics and morality. Some people say that fetuses from abortions were used in the production of the vaccines. I guess they're probably thinking in the line of stem cells and all of that. Is that true? And some are saying as a result of that, people who share the sentiments of, look, just for the moral reasons, I will not take this vaccine. Do you want to speak to that, either of you?
I can address it. It said there were no fetuses used. The mRNA vaccines, essentially, it's knowing what the proteins that make up a particular gene in the COVID virus is, and then trying to reproduce that protein sequence. There's no fetus involved. Okay. The other vaccines, so the Johnson & Johnson vaccines and the AstraZeneca vaccines, there is no fetus involved in this either. I don't know how much detail you want to get into, but essentially, it's using like a.
Let's leave it at that for laymen, for so that we, the common man, can understand. Simply put, no fetus is involved. So no those who have those, yeah, okay. Yeah. So I guess for me, this is more important and relevant in the sense that, or more immediate. Where do you see this going? If and when people now begin to take the vaccine en masse, how far do you see, or let's put it this way, when do you think we can come to some form of normalcy? Do you think that within the next few months we will go back to normal? How or do you think we will still have to be dealing with lockdowns and social distancing in the near and immediate future, or in the long-term future?
Okay, man, I'll give a very brief comment, and I'll probably let Prof expatiate, or because he probably would know more, with respect to this.
Go on, Dr. Tah.
But if you listen to Dr. Anthony Fauci and the team that Biden has put together, for the COVID response team, nobody can come up with a specific time period, but even Anthony Fauci is saying December 2020, we're still going to be wearing masks and social distancing, and stuff like
2021 or 20?
No, sorry, 2022, I think 2022, maybe first quarter, second quarter. Nobody can actually put a finger on it, but we know we still have a long process to go, a long way to go. 2-3 months, I really, really doubt that, because when we're talking about people within the ages of 30, 20, 40, they've actually not received their jabs yet, unless if they belong to a high-risk group, or they are immunocompromised and stuff like that. So they're probably not going to get vaccinated until maybe sometime in the late summer, projected. So in terms of normalcy, it's going to be tough. 2022, who knows? I'll let Prof, chip in on that.
Before Prof, thanks for that, Dr. Tah. Before Prof comes in, let me just give you the figures here in the United Kingdom so that you can put things in perspective, because you guys are in the United States. apparently within the last 2 or so months, 17.7 million people have been vaccinated out of a population of about 67.8 million people in the United Kingdom, which is about 26%.
Right.
So I think things are moving more rapidly here. Our lockdown is being eased up, and it is said, I think by the 21st of June, it will be opened up altogether. So in that light, what do you think, Prof? Do you think that, I mean, there's a possibility of coming back to normalcy in the immediate future?
Immediate future is very unlikely. When you say immediate, it's like next month. I know in the United States, we anticipate that about a third of US population, which is 300 million people, so a third is about 100 million people, that if things continue to go the way they are, maybe by April or so, you could vaccinate a third. But that's still a long distance from half or 60 or 70%. But society is beginning to open up. And even in the United States, schools are starting to, or will be in the next few weeks, will start having in-person instruction, which is a very important milestone. But I think that some of the things that have come as a result of COVID will probably stay with us, like the wearing of masks for a very long time. And I wouldn't be surprised if 5 years from now, when it's winter time, when cold viruses are all over the place, that people just put on masks, not because there's a massive epidemic or pandemic, but because we know for a fact that there is some protection that occurs when you wear a mask. I'll give you an example. At our institution, we've had only one case of influenza so far, and this is February. Whereas historically, by now, we would have had hundreds of cases of influenza. And I think that is probably not unconnected with the fact that society in general, we're wearing more masks and people are getting vaccinated. So society will open up. As has been said, we don't have a glass, a mirror that will tell us exactly when that opening will take place. But as long as we don't revert, that is the key thing. And that we address it as a global issue rather than the UK, you said, is doing well. But if the UK is doing well and Nigeria feels people vaccinated, you're just going to keep receding the whole thing. So this is one of the few times where the world really has to come together and make sure that there's equity in vaccine access and attainment of immunity.
That's another very big conversation. The issue of even within Europe. I'm sure you've seen the vaccine wars between mainland Europe and the UK, and in Africa they haven't even started. I mean, I know that Nigeria has not even begun to fully conceive how they will buy the vaccines, and then the logistics of vaccinating the whole population. And like you said, if indeed these other nations lag behind, it's a pandemic. Our borders are porous, no matter how strict and stringent, the government is. We can have reinfections. What are your closing thoughts on that?
Well, you see, Pastor, the model that the UK is using for vaccinating her populace, unless if things have changed, I mean, from what I've read, it's actually different from what we're doing here. The key for the UK model is let everybody get a shot in their arms, at least one dose. Oh. That's the key. The mRNA vaccine, you guys have the BioNTech vaccine, which is the Pfizer vaccine, and the AstraZeneca vaccine in the UK. So the Pfizer vaccine and the AstraZeneca requires 2 doses, to get the, efficacy that they truly desire. But the model being used in the UK that, look, you know what, we're a small nation, we're not so big, we don't have, we only have X number of vaccines, so to speak, because of that surge that we had over Christmas. And then, look, you know what, it's better for us to just get the vaccine into everybody's arms first, 1 dose. And then we'll start thinking about the second dose later, But over here, we're getting 2 doses. You get first dose, and then maybe about 2, 3, 4 weeks later, you get the second dose. So, but look, it's brilliant because at least you're getting a degree of immunity.
Protection.
Yes, now it's going to be very, very difficult, unless if you want to close your borders or our borders for months and months to come and say, hey, look, you know what? Until we vaccinated everybody and created a herd immunity, we're not going to let people from XYZ nations come out. That's why it's very, very important. I personally think the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is huge. The AstraZeneca vaccine is actually fantastic. I'm talking about for Africa and for smaller countries, third world nations. How many people are going to go and get 2 shots in Nigeria? I mean, how are we going to track them? But the Johnson & Johnson is just one shot, it's just a single shot, And from what Prof said, even though the efficacy is, runs up to about 60-something%, but the point is that in terms of the number of patients who have moderate to severe disease, it's been 0. With the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. So are we going to wait for people from third world nations to all get vaccinated first before they can come into our countries? It's tough. But at least if you can get as many people vaccinated to create a herd, I think that's key, really.
Thank you so much for that, enlightened contribution. Prof, I know you guys have to go. Your parting thoughts on these matters.
Well, I would like to thank you, Dr. Pastor Sola Fola-Alade, for really convening this forum. I think we're at a moment in history where people will look back and say, how did we respond to this pandemic? The scientists have done their part, governments are doing their part, and I think that individuals must now do their part. So I'm really talking to everyone who's part of this, who's listening to this now, and saying that if you have not received the vaccine and you have access to the vaccine, please go take the shot. Because in doing so, you're protecting not just yourself, you're protecting our society. And I think that a lot of, we should celebrate the achievements that have occurred during this period, which is to create a vaccine, or not one, but to create vaccines in such a short time frame. It's truly a scientific feat, and I hope that society will embrace it and get vaccinated. I'll also thank AstraZeneca, because one thing that AstraZeneca, Oxford, the UK folks, because the way the vaccine development was approached by these entities really looked at the world as one community. And so the vaccine apparently there's a negotiation that the vaccine dose can be obtained for $2 to $3, right? And the vaccine doesn't require extensive refrigeration. It actually arrived in Ghana. So the first set of the AstraZeneca vaccine arrived in Ghana, sponsored by this global consortium of COVAX and WHO and Gavi and everybody trying to lift this boat. So let's meet the moment, and hopefully we can achieve herd immunity as soon as possible.
Thank you very much. Doctor, I'm cognizant of both your times. Do you want to give us very quick parting thoughts, and then I will round off and then we close?
Yes, thank you very much, Pastor Sola and Prof. Very, very, I'm honored to actually share the same table, with both of you, talking about the COVID vaccine. My parting statement is extremely brief. Get the vaccine that you can get. Don't look at the numbers. Don't look at 60%, 70%, 80%. Get the vaccine that you can get into your arms ASAP. COVID is real. I deal with COVID patients on a daily basis. I'm looking for work now.